Guys, Katie here, and today is part of our monthly collab. This month we are featuring our brand new sketchbook, Volume 5. It is 12 by 12 format, and I'm going to show you how to adapt your photos to fit the sketch.
So this collab features our brand new Volume 5 book, and I've looked at several sketches in here, and I knew what photos I wanted to use. So I have several that are portrait, and then I have several that can be trimmed down to 4x4. So ultimately I went with this sketch, and I also went with this sketch because I am going to be using the Mediterranean Blooms paper. I originally did not purchase this paper from Stampin' Up, but after we went on this trip and I saw that several girls used it to document our little visit to this Greek restaurant, I really fell in love with it, and I happened to get it when it was discounted, so that's always a plus. But also, this sketch is going to allow me to use some of this bolder paper in the background that's really going to accent my photos. So you can see here we've got some citrus, but we've also got some blues. For some reason, all my citruses are sticking together, but you got lots of citruses in there, which also plays along with the photos. I've got lots of blues, and then we've got the candlelight, and then of course it's a Greek restaurant. And then of course we had some drinks, so I've pulled out the celebratory sips or celebrate together. This paper, I've already cut some out, but once I get my photos and my paper selected, I'll actually cut ones out that kind of complement those. We've got Andrea that she's in her pretty pink, so I definitely could pull in some pink drinks. And then I've also pulled out the Peaceful Gardens 12 by 12 glimmer paper because I just love all the blues. So I think that that's really going to kind of just add that extra touch. So I'm going to go get some things cut, kind of decide on my paper selections, probably trim down my photos, and then pull in some other things as we go along, and I'll let you know what those are. There's always links down below. But other than that, I think we can get started. Okay, I have all of my pieces cut, but I am going to use kind of a big background piece instead of just cardstock. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to gut these. Just using the measurements that are on the sketch, kind of trying to figure out what they are. So I'm going to trim these down. And then I'm going to do, I think I'm going to leave this one whole. But on this one, since it is basically the entire piece, I'm going to trim it down, and I'm going to use a 2-inch border. So I'm going to line this up. This is basically for the newbies. If y'all subscribe and watch my videos often, you see me do this. But being that the majority of this right here is going to be hidden, I'm going to cut it out, and that's going to allow me just to kind of hold on to this, especially since this paper, I believe, is no longer available. And I love blues. Not necessarily keeping it from the back for the back side, but definitely for this side. So I'm going to do, let's see. Yeah, I'm going to do 2 inches. So I've got this lined up at 10 inches. And then the piece that is going to be on top of this goes all the way to the edge. So I'm going to cut all the way from this edge, and then I'm going to stop my blade at 10 inches over here. So now I've got 2 inches here. I've stopped my blade, and I'm going to have 2 inches there. So I'm just going to pick up my trimmer, my blade, and I'm going to rotate this, and again, line this up at 10 inches. Now on this cut, I only want to go from 2 to 10 because I need this piece intact and this piece. So it's kind of hard to see my blade over here. 2 and 10. And then I'm going to rotate it a third time. Now on this one, you're only going to be cutting 3 sides. Now this is the side, remember, that we cut all the way through. So I'm going to start my blade way over there, and I'm going to cut all the way down to 2 inches. It is so hard to see. And then this piece pops out. And you'll see what I'm talking about once I actually adhered this to my cardstock base. So that is that. And then now I have these full pieces that I can save for later instead of wasting 2 12 by 12s. Okay, so I'm going to assemble the left layout first. I am actually working sideways right now, just because for some reason I can adhere better top to bottom than left to right. I don't know why. I don't know if y'all are like that too. So the layout's actually going to be like this. So I've adhered that piece down, and then we're going to come back in with this piece. Now I did some adjustments to the sketch a little. I actually want this kind of elongated, but because I already cut this piece based on the sketch, I'm going to have to kind of piece these together and then hide the seam, which isn't a big deal. You usually can do that with embellishments and such. So we're going to go here. You want to make sure that your lemons are facing up. And get that adhered down. And then we're going to come back in with these. And so I think I'm actually going to use the one with no stems. And then I can kind of piece together. Now, if you're wondering, like, oh, I can see this line right here, this actually is going to be hidden by another piece. It's mainly this right side that's going to be seen. And then I'm just going to apply adhesive directly to my layout base, and then get that adhered down, and then just take scissors and trim this off. Okay, so we've got that done. So the next thing we're going to do is we have this piece. I have also gutted, this is Daffodil Delight cardstock. I've also gutted it just because I might use that color for my photo mats, and I don't have a whole lot of it. So I've gutted it. Now this gets put on top of the cardstock. And so when I usually have a gutted piece, I like to adhere or put the adhesive directly onto the gutted piece. And then that way I kind of know where the adhesive is supposed to go versus putting it on here. And I probably would have messed up and I would have put adhesive, on this open side. Again, I'm going to turn this sideways so I can kind of work top to bottom. And you just kind of want to just kind of be loose with it. Okay, so we've got that. And that is going to go right there. I have a piece on the right side that is really similar to this one. So I'm going to actually go ahead and assemble this piece as well and see if they line up. I noticed that I adhered it where this top kind of frame is a little bit wider than the bottom. So if I can get this right page to do that as well, then we can just trim it before we adhere it down. Okay, yeah, so I'm going to just go trim just a hair off of the tops of these. Okay, so then now I'm going to adhere this down. I'm going to eyeball it. If you wanted to bring out either your Versamat, if you have one from Close to My Heart, or if you're working on your glass board, a ruler, anything like that. I'm just eyeballing this one, and then I'm going to use this as a guide for the right layout. So even if it's not really centered, being that they're both going to be directly across from each other, it'll look fine. So I am trying to decide on photos, and I really can't make up my mind. This by far was the best Greek salad I have ever tasted. So I want to include it, but it's a large photo. And then I have these two photos. I always love to take a picture of the restaurant signage. And then I also have one where I took a selfie in front of it. There's no need to have both, but I really can't decide which one I want to use. Pretty much going to use our group photo on the right layout. But y'all know me, if I have stuff that I'm kind of hem-hawing back and forth of what I want to use, I usually like to go ahead and do some busy work in the background while I'm thinking about what I can do. And so I'm going to start cutting some of these, and then I've pulled out additional papers. Like I'm thinking about cutting some of these lemon groupings. Now, this did have a coordinating die cut. Like I said before, I wasn't really going to get this paper collection at first, and it's out. I don't think I'm going to bring in the oranges. This might actually be, I'm thinking about cutting one of these squares out, and the sketch calls for a circle, but I'm thinking about using a square. So while I am thinking about the photos, I can just start doing some cutting. If you are not a fussy cut person, which a lot of people aren't, and to tell you the truth, sometimes I am not either, but also sometimes even if they have coordinating dies, if I only need one and I'm not using die cuts for anything else on my project, sometimes it is just a lot easier for me just to die cut the shapes out. Now, because I have lemons on that left layout, on that left kind of sidebar, I don't think I need any more than one of these cut. And that's going to bring the lemons. There's a small, tiny piece of that lemon paper over on the right layout. But just by cutting one of these, it's going to bring those lemons over to the right layout. And I don't think that I need to cut two or even more of these. It's always helpful to have the same elements on both sides. Just kind of makes it look a little bit more cohesive than just, slapping a group of lemons down. But like I said, since I'm using some different DSP that has lemons on there, that's going to kind of be the cohesiveness. So you can see just how quick this shape came to fussy cut out. So we have that one. I may do something like this, but I'm not going to go to that trouble right now. I can always come back in, and if I want to use some more, since that one is a double lemon, I'm thinking I might do a single lemon. And in fact, while I have my scissors out, I'm not going to fussy cut this, but I'm just going to kind of loosely cut this out and leave it on my table, and that way I'll kind of know what I was thinking. Now, this little trip was, we had gone over to have tea, and this was actually that evening before we went back. And we had kind of researched restaurants and then kind of found this one. I love friend groups that are just so easy. We have a couple of the girls that are gluten-free. But even that, they either found something to eat, or those of us who, love gluten, can handle it and digest it. We actually enjoyed those restaurants and those choices. And it was just something, nice to try. And it was just wonderful being around friends that are just so easily adaptable. This was our first girls trip, our first CDT trip. And so, there was also that kind of, we talk all the time on a daily basis. We have monthly Zooms. We bounce ideas off of each other. But, you know, there was also kind of that fear that you're going to meet these. In my mind, it was more of you're going to meet these heroes, these girls that you've just come to admire and hold up to the standard. And, you know, what if it doesn't work out? What if, you know, they're not as nice in person when they have to be nice 24/7? So on and so forth. I was also worried about me. You know, I'm kind of an opinionated person. I think that I'm pretty true to myself on here and, you know, on social media. But, you know, also, you know, you're sleeping with other girls. Do I snore? Do I snore too loud? Do I, you know, smack? Of course, my husband usually lets me know if I do any of those things. But it was nice to just meet them in person. I had met some of them at Close to My Heart conventions. This was my first time actually meeting and seeing in person. Of course, Janice, you know, she's from Australia. Erin, I had already met Jama. I had met Andrea. I think maybe Julie I hadn't met. Now, I know I hadn't met Julie because I was so surprised how tiny she is. You don't really know that. And of course, you know, I'm a tall girl. And so it was just so amazing. You should have seen us in the airport. Okay, back to scrapbooking. Enough about that. So I've die cut some of those things out. And then I'm going to go ahead, while I'm still thinking about photos, I'm going to go ahead and assemble this right layout. And then that will take care of the bulk of the things before decisions really have to be made. So we've got our gutted piece. I'm just going to go ahead, and this one's a little bit different because it is the full 12 by 12 top to bottom. I am not adding adhesive on the inside. That's going to allow me to kind of lay things down because you're working with such a flimsy piece and it's large. Sometimes it's easier not to have adhesive all over it because, you know, you're going to have pieces on top of it that have adhesive, but that's going to allow you to kind of mess with it. Make sure it's straight on the layout, so on and so forth. Yeah. We've got that. We already did this one to make sure that it lines up. So I'm going to bring this left layout out, and then we can really line those up, and it'll look like it was measured and not eyeballed. Got that. There we go. And then we have these two pieces, which I'm not adhering down right now. So now let's take a look at photos. So the sketch calls for something like this, which I'm also liking this grouping because it is of just food on this right layout. The left layout is more of the restaurant. It's of us. This is the food. I could journal here. But then we have this. So the other option would be doing a flip flap under our group photo, which might be what I do. Gosh, it's so hard. I wish I had one more photo. I'm going to go take a look at the other photos the girls took, and I might print another one. Okay, I am going to do some stamping and die cutting right quick. I am going to use the Spotlight on Nature. I have these two circles, as I like to call them. I think everybody calls them this, the paper plate circles. So I have those two, and then I've pulled out the Greenery Lane. I kind of like this one. I actually was going to try to use some of the die cuts that I already did from the washi tape, but the greens just weren't quite right. So I decided not to do that. So I'm going to stamp some of those. And then I also have the fragrant layers. So I think I am going to cut a couple of more of these little intricate pieces and then do some blending on the inside. And then I'm also just going to kind of play around, and I'm going to go ahead and stamp that and then also add some color to that and die cut out. Now, while I have the circles out, you remember this piece that I cut? I kind of roughed it out, didn't do that on camera, but the square is just kind of weird. I like it as a diamond, but the space just doesn't allow for that. So I'm going to go back to the circles, which is what the sketch calls for. But I might also try to die cut this circle out just to see what it looks like. Otherwise, the circles are going to be plain white, and they are just going to basically be landing spots, kind of anchor spots for those lemon pieces that I fussy cut out. So I've got this greenery lane, and like I said, I really like this image. It's kind of intricate, so I kind of had to watch how I'm peeling that away. And then the two greens in this collection are Garden Green and Old Olive. So I have the Old Olive ink pad, but then the Garden Green one, I just have a Stampin' spot. But I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of do an inking. We're going to play around and see what this looks like. Have a sponge dauber. So I'm going to ink it up all in Old Olive. And then I'm going to come back in with the Garden Green on a sponge dauber, and I'm just going to kind of hit the middle parts. We're going to see what that looks like. Let's put it on this one. So it's pretty subtle. You can see it. Definitely need to get that out of the way. Okay, let's try another one. I'm going to second generation this first. So I'm going to stamp off. That was the Old Olive. And then I'm going to come back in with the Garden Green. Just kind of sponge around. And let's see what that one looks like. So you definitely can see that one more than this one. But you know, it's going to be layered behind here. So, I'll do some finagling and kind of see which one I like more. As far as the fragrant flowers, I'm inking this up actually in Secret Sea. Secret Sea is not in this collection, but I just really love it. I've told y'all before, it's more like a neutral to me. It's a good stand-in for a black if you don't want something so stark as a black. So we're going to ink that down. And then I think as far as the color, I'm going to use a yellow, but maybe a second generation. I feel like I have to get my big blocks out for this one. So the colors in this one are Lemon Lolly and Daffodil Delight. So I'm going to try two things. I do not have either one of those yellow colors in Stampin' Up! Color ink pad. So I've got Close to My Heart's Lemon, and then I've got Strawberry Slush. Because remember Andrea's shirt is pink? I feel like I can come in with a pink, and especially on these flowers. And that might be the answer for that. And then there may be enough of a contrast behind here that it would look okay if I play it right. Okay, so I think I just did one where I'm going to ink this up in Secret C like I have been doing. And then this solid piece I'm going to ink up in lemon. So you would use either Lemon Lolly or Darling Daffodil, no, Daffodil Delight. And then I used Strawberry Slush blending brush and just kind of tapped some of that strawberry slush over the centers of these flowers and then these little buds right here. And I think I'm going to like that. Even if I don't use all of these, of course, I have several color variations. Even though I don't use them on this layout, they are already stamped and I can use them either on other layouts or cards. So I really like that. And then as far as the leaf goes, since this is so subtle, I think I'm going to do second generation. So I'm just trying to get a scratch piece of cardstock here. If you use scratch cardstock, you can always go ahead and die cut them out. And then you can use them on other projects. So see how subtle that is? And then we have the lemon. So it's going to bring in that pink. Okay, I think I have a plan. I've already adhered these two photos, and then I'm going to do a flip flap over here, over this yummy Greek salad. And so I'm just going to lay my flip flap over here. So we've got the restaurant signage, and then behind this restaurant signage is the one where I took a selfie. So I am just trying to get this. Of course, this doesn't have adhesive on it yet, but I was basically just trying to get it lined up with this one. And then I always like to take my bone folder and really crease. Let me pick this up. So there are these little dots on, it's going to be hard to tell. So there are these little dots right here. Once you take your bone folder, it just kind of really adheres those dots down. So you could also see how dark it turns, hopefully, on the camera. So we've got that, and now I can adhere this yummy salad photo down. And on this one, I'm making sure that the top is even with this one. And then the actual photo edge is even. Now I'm not going to press down until I kind of flip this over and make sure. And I am happy with that. So now I can really press this down. And then I also have the circles that I discussed cutting, and then I have this piece that originally was going to be journaling, but I think I'm going to do my title on here, and then I'm going to do strip journaling along the bottom. The sketch called for a couple of strips of paper, but we've already got so many patterns going on here, I decided to forego that. So what I'm going to do is I think I'm going to use two big ones and a small one. And then as far as my title, I'm using the Our Story stamp set. I'm going to be doing The Best Memories Are Created with Friends on this piece. And then I'm going to be adding just some background color. Boho Blue is in this collection, and it's going to be a really good kind of background to these little clusters that I'm going to create. So I'm just going to use a blending brush. I'm going to tap in the middle because pretty much the middle is going to be covered by everything. And then I'm just going to kind of work my way out. I don't want all of the circle, but I definitely want you to be able to just kind of see that subtle color poking out from behind. And I'm going to do that on all of these. Now on this one, I'm going to have to be kind of careful because this one doesn't have as much stuff on it. But, you know, I definitely want the blue. Okay, and then as far as the inking, I think I'm going to do it in boho blue. Now I'm going to be bringing out my Stampin' Spot for Night of Navy. And I think I want the Best Memories Are Created With and the Night of Navy. And then I'm going to do the Friends and the boho blue. So I'm going to bring this one out first. Well, actually, you know what? I'm going to bring both of them out. That way we can do kind of a little side by side here. Okay. So that is going to go there. We've got a large one down here. Going to kind of have to keep in mind this flip flap. So I'm just going to temporarily lift that up. I want a large one right here, and then this one's going to go right here. So I've got my triangles of circles. Now I'm wanting to do something here. And I think I'm going to wait for that because I need to see what I'm going to do behind these little groupings. So I want my lemon. And then I want some of these. I'm just going to be tucking these behind here, and then we'll kind of figure out how this is going to work. Now, if you notice, I did decide to go with the single color Old Olive. I think we're going to do that. I'm trying to keep my stems pretty up and down. I have to come back and think about that one. I have to do something where I stamp the F over here. Okay, so I've got that, and then I am going to pull in some of these. So being that we're going to kind of split this, just going to kind of cut this in half. And we'll have this one peeking out from there. We'll have that one peeking out from there. Now on here, I went ahead and re-stamped and then fussy cut that out. I think I'm going to take, because I've got pink right here, I think I might regret this, but I'm just going to add some pink behind here. So then once I put that down, it just kind of glows. So I've already adhered this grouping down. I've got various levels of dimensionals on there. And then I've gone ahead and I've added some dimensionals to here. But before we actually adhere it down here, I need to cover up this line. Remember, I had to kind of piece those together. The sketch calls for, just a thin piece of paper. But I think I'm going to actually do some ribbon. I've pulled out the Night of Navy ribbon. I'm going to trim it down and just kind of wrap it around the back and get that adhered down. I'm also going to be doing the same treatment over here. And then as far as the bows and stuff go, I think I'm going to be using this Old Olive thread. There is some natural tones, so we've got the blue here, and then I also kind of like the touch of gold. So I've got a big huge mess here that I may try and figure out and do some sort of bow, but then, you know, just tie some, you know, like little trails, or maybe even just a double bow. I'll figure that out and I will come back and do that. So we've got that. So all of this is adhered down, and then I want to start playing with these twines and or maybe even ribbon. I don't really think that a bow is required, but I think some of this kind of tucked in behind these little pieces. So I'm going to do, since these are pretty large pieces, I'm going to do around 2 fingers, then around, well, no, I need some more. Around 2 fingers, around 3 fingers, and around 4 fingers. And y'all can see what a mess I have made of this gold thread. It's one of those things that you just kind of wonder if you should just start all over. So I had a migraine yesterday. It was a busy day yesterday, very busy, but then ended up getting a migraine. Had to cut my day short. And I'm just going to trim that off. And then you can always take these and make them either bigger, smaller, whatever the case may be. And then we're just going to put a glue dot right here. And that will allow us to adhere all of these layers together, but then also take that glue dot and poke it underneath. So we've got that, and then I'm going to take your pick tool, kind of wrap that around as I'm taking it off. And then I don't know if I want it here. Probably under here. Now you've got to kind of take it and put it however far deep you want. So I like these tails. Now they are long enough that I can make them go wherever I want them to. They have wrapped around that one. And then you can also take some of these, if these are too big for you, you can take another glue dot and you can just start pushing them in, making them a little bit shorter. So I'm just going to kind of attach the middle of this bigger circle, and I'm just going to bring this in. And then you can always kind of play with those. You also, if you had a big, huge circle, you could actually kind of split these up. And you can make it go over here. Just kind of do whatever you want. I'm also going to do a couple of these little ribbon tails. So you're just going to cut your ribbon, depending on how you like it. That's probably, what, 3 inches tip to tip. And then I do a glue dot on the center and then fold it back on each other. I do like my ribbon tails going the same direction. So I'm just going to trim that one. And then we can always trim this one down. Spread them out a little bit and then put that folded edge on another glue dot. And then you're just going to tuck it just like you would these other little ribbon tails. So I might have to do this one down here. And then we'll do another one up there that's a little bit shorter. I'm going to use the low profile dots. These are no longer available, but I absolutely love them. Even on layouts where you can get a little bit more embellished, there's just something about these low profile ones that I just love using. So if you have them, lucky you. If you don't have them, we have some other colors, just not the gold. And then, of course, you see me, I'm just kind of doing these all around, these little groupings. Okay, and I think that is pretty much it. I will add some strip journaling down here at the bottom to finish this layout off. Now, I did have a flip-flap. If you're new here, I prefer to do the flip-flap directly to my layout base and then cut my memory protector. I have a couple of videos showing how that's done. I'll leave those linked down below so you can go take a look. If you have any questions once you've watched that video, just leave me a comment and let me know, and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Here are some close-ups of this layout. Don't forget that this is featuring our brand new Volume 5 12 by 12 sketchbook. It is available for purchase right now. You'll find that linked down below on our website. And then you'll also find a playlist linked where all the other creative design team girls have been doing their take on one of the sketches of this book all week. Thanks so much for stopping by and watching. I hope y'all have a wonderful rest of your weekend.